Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of Monday, July 15th, 2024. And please note that the webinar will be recorded and published to the city's YouTube site. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and the recommendation is that the agenda for the Governance and Operations Committee meeting be adopted. Councillor Hanson, Councillor Cashel, all those in favor? Thank you, carried unanimously. And this afternoon, we have a delegation from the City of Trail Community Resilience Plan final report. And I'll hand it over to Carleen Peters.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. So we are joined today by our consultant from BA Blackwell & Associates, Monica Nugent. She is virtually attending, and she's going to present a general overview for the City of Trail Community Wildfire Resiliency Plans for 2024. So I will turn it over to Monica.
Thanks, Carleen. I have a few slides to show here, so I might just put those up. And can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming. I think just Carleen briefly mentioned, Blackwell is a forestry consulting company. We are based out of North Vancouver. We've completed wildfire plans for communities around the province since about 2005. I'm a forest technician with Blackwell and the plan author. The purpose of this presentation is to review the recently completed CWRP for the City of Trail. So just to start, I'm going to introduce the project. We'll discuss some key concepts. We'll look at the local wildfire threat for the City of Trail, and then we'll just discuss some key recommendations made in the CWRP. Starting off, just to look at the project phases. To develop the CWRP, we began with gathering information and a background review, followed by field work. So this was done in December of 2023. So you'll see some snowy photos in here. When we're in the field, we complete standard plot forms to document characteristics of fuels in different locations. We confirmed the fuel type of the vegetation. So fuel type is a forest fuels classification assigned by the federal government. It's a standard nationwide forest fuel classification system. We also made observations about characteristics of neighborhoods and critical infrastructure, and we considered locations where fuel management treatment might be appropriate. Then we took all that information and used it to draft the actual plan. And this was finalized in April of this year, so recently completed. And this finalized CWRP has two main functions. It identifies wildfire risk and the consequences of wildfire to the community, and it lays out an action plan to reduce those risks. So that action plan is that the recommendations we'll talk about. All of the recommendations in the plan, it's worth noting, have been drafted to consider what activities are eligible for funding by the Union of BC Municipalities CRI program. So these are all grant-funded activities that we're talking about in this presentation. Next, I just would briefly like to review a few of these key concepts. So firstly, the wildland-urban interface, or the WUI. This might already be familiar to many of you, but just to go over it again, FireSmart Canada defines the WUI as the area where structures meet with undeveloped wildland or vegetative fuels. So it's not specifically forest. these fuels could include grasslands, shrublands. It's important to highlight because it's an important area to target these community wildfire resiliency efforts in. This is the area where wildfire can enter the community, and it's also the area where humans can ignite fire and it can travel outside the community into surrounding wildland areas. And in the plan, we also talk a lot about interface, intermix, and spot fire risk areas. The interface is an area where there's a defined perimeter of development that occurs next to a continuous expanse of wildland area. So it's an area where you have this clean line that separates neighborhoods or structures from wildland fuels. In comparison, intermix areas are developments where you're embedded right within the forest and you have these wildland fuels that are mixed in between structures. And then finally, it's also worth noting that more heavily developed neighborhoods that are located further away from the edge of wildland areas can still be impacted by wildfire. And that's because in a wildfire, sparks, embers, or bits of flaming material can fly ahead of the fire front, propelled by wind, and create spot fires in neighborhoods that otherwise are not that close to the burning vegetation. So on this Google Earth illustration, you just kind of pointed out some of these different locations in the Lower Columbia area. So we've highlighted interface areas, for example, on the north side of trail around Mile Heights. We've also pointed towards the perimeter of Warfield and Montrose as an example of that, and highlighted intermix areas around Fruitvale, but the neighborhood Oasis, I believe is the name, would also be an example of an intermix site. And then we've also pointed out spot fire risk closer to downtown trail. Okay, and then just a few more definitions important for this project. We just discussed the wildland urban interface. That's a pretty general term that's used rather generically, but the eligible WUI is a specific term. It's defined by the Union of BC Municipalities and the BC Wildfire Service to define the study area of all the CWRPs written in the province. So this is just used for the purposes of the grant funding program. So you may see it discussed throughout the plan. That's the origin of that. It's a spatially defined area. It's created based on structure density information, and it limits where our assessment and fuel treatment can take place. So all of the field work and spatial analysis for this project took place in the eligible WUI. Here's a map that highlights this. So your eligible WUI is the pink shaded area here. You'll notice because there's so much continuous development between Warfield Trail and Montrose that the eligible WUI is continuous through all those three communities. But the eligible WUI for Fruitvale, for example, is separate. So this is a continuous area that we were looking at. And then moving on, our next slide after this shows the results of the local wildfire threat assessment. And just to briefly describe that process, it's assigns different wildfire threat classes like low, medium, high to different areas in the eligible WUI. And we obtain those results by taking several different key inputs and combining them together to get those different classes. The inputs, there's 4 of them for this wildfire threat assessment process. And the first is updated fuel types from the field work. So kind of we briefly mentioned this earlier, but fuel types, they're different kinds of vegetation that are associated with different fire behavior. So we confirmed that pre-existing data about fuel types is correct. Then our second input for this is the distance of fuels to the community. So a higher risk rating is given to vegetation that is closer to structures, and a lower risk rating is given to vegetation that is further away. The third input to this is topography, because wildfire travels faster, more easily on steeper slopes compared with flatter terrain. And then the fourth input we have is information about fire spread patterns that we obtain from BC Wildfire Services fire weather data. So we're taking these four inputs together to map local wildfire threat in the community. So this was the result. This is our local wildfire threat map. It shows 3% of public land has a high or extreme rating. So that's the orange or red. 50% is a moderate threat. 47% was associated with a low or very low threat rating. And then private land made up 62% of the eligible WUI. And then, as we briefly mentioned earlier, private land is not eligible for assessment in any of the CWRPs completed in the province. So this was excluded from our analysis. And then, as you see, this eligible WUI encompasses the area from Warfield through Trail to Montrose. So those statistics are reflective of that entire area. The highest hazard patches that we noticed were kind of northeast of Montrose. And then the lower hazard areas that made up a larger portion of what we looked at were mostly associated with the shrubby vegetation and some of the deciduous stands on the valley bottom. Next, we'll go over our key recommendations. So these were made within the 7 Fire Smart disciplines, kind of categories of wildfire risk reduction actions, which include education, legislation and planning, interagency cooperation, cross-training, emergency planning, and vegetation management. I'm just going to go over the highest priority ones in pretty general terms, but there's substantially more detail in the CWRP documents, as well as some of the lower priority recommendations that we will just not go over today. So starting with education, these recommendations are about building awareness and understanding of Fire Smart with residents and visitors in the community. As you may know, the RDKB has done a lot of work to establish a strong Fire Smart education program. We recommended that they maintain and expand those initiatives, and we recommended a few new initiatives to specifically consider. For example, this included customizing their outreach to rural property owners that have larger parcels of land, promoting the Fire Smart Neighborhood Recognition Program, and using Fire Smart materials in elementary and secondary schools to reach youth audiences. The lead agency for this would obviously be the RDKB Fire Smart staff. Our second discipline is legislation and planning, and we made recommendations about how to use policy tools to reduce wildfire risk in this area. So specifically updating certain local plans and bylaws so they reflect current conditions and issues. For example, the city of Trail, as I was writing the plan, a new OCP was as kind of being considered for development. I'm not sure where you are now with that, but we recommended incorporating wildfire as a natural hazard that could affect the municipality when that draft is getting developed. And we also recommended considering a wildfire development permit area policy. So this is a policy tool that allows municipalities to regulate building construction at the interface. And typically they require developers to use fire smart building materials and standards during construction or the major renovations of existing structures. They might also include guidelines that regulate landscaping. For example, prohibiting planting conifers within, 1.5 meters of the home, that kind of thing. These planning, legislation, and development recommendations would be led by the City of Trail because it's these local bylaws that apply. Okay, next we made recommendations for interagency cooperation. These are about linking government, stakeholders, and First Nations together to share local knowledge. One of the most important ones was continuing to hold meetings of the Community Fire Smart and Resiliency Committee. It's a requirement to continually be eligible for funding for the other Fire Smart activities from UBCM, and it's an important way to stay in touch between jurisdictions. And then we also recommended seeking out opportunities to support Indigenous participation on this committee and to increase the engagement with tech resources. And our lead agencies really involve everyone here. Next, we have cross-training. This is all about ensuring government staff who may be involved in emergency response or wildfire response are appropriately trained. So we recommended holding training exercises with other agencies like BC Wildfire Service, helping to make sure everyone is familiar with different protocols, communication styles, and continuing to build those relationships across organizations. And then in addition to that, maintaining or expanding the wildfire training that the Kootenay Boundary Regional Fire Rescue maintains for its staff. Our key recommendations related to emergency planning were mostly reducing risk to critical infrastructure by completing upgrades based on assessments that were done in 2022. It should be noted that because there's infrastructure that's owned by different agencies, different local government bodies, those upgrades would be the owner of the infrastructure would be the proponent of that project, but upgrades are eligible within certain parameters for funding by UBCM. We also recommended continuing to hold evacuation plan exercises and pre-planning emergency water delivery. That refers to creating a strategy in advance for how water would be shuttled from lakes or rivers to fill bladders to fight a wildfire in a neighborhood. Then in the event of a wildfire, you would implement that strategy. So there'd be a number of different agencies that could be involved in implementing this. And then finally, we made recommendations for vegetation management. There's a couple kind of subcategories to this. So firstly, we recommended the RDKB offer initiatives to support residents in completing fire smart landscaping. As you notice, there's a very significant proportion of private land within that eligible WUI. So this is a particularly important way, or just one option, to reduce that risk on private property where fuel treatments can't be completed. And then we did identify some areas where fuel management treatment might take place. And as well, we also recommended that the RDKB work with other agencies that are land managers in the area that might hold tenure or manage private land, just to make sure that their vegetation management strategies are adequate in reducing wildfire risk. So for example, this could be working with utility companies that manage vegetation on power line right-of-ways, that kind of thing. This map shows the fuel management treatment units that were proposed in the city of Trail. So 2 are located on either side of Ravens Trail, west of Myrtle Heights and above the hospital. I'm sure you all remember there's a small fire here. So the fire was just located south of these treatment unit boundaries. And then we also have one located around a reservoir that's intended, partially intended as a demonstration treatment to showcase fire smart landscaping principles to people in the neighborhood, as well as completing that critical infrastructure risk reduction work. And just one other thing that's worth noting about these fuel management treatments was that the proposed order of operations for this, completing fuel management treatments, is a multi-phase process. So now that they've been identified in the CWRP, the next step is completing fuel management prescriptions, which are like a site plan to say specifically what actions might take place there. And then after that, fuel management treatment itself could occur. And the order of operations that's outlined in the document is that the RDKB might lead prescription development if and when it's greenlit to go ahead. And then the actual fuel management treatment itself would be led by the city of Trail. And then once again, this is all funded, all eligible for funding by UBCM. So, and that wraps it up. So if there's any questions, happy to discuss. And exit out here.
Okay, thank you so much. Council, is there any questions for Monica or Carleen? Councillor Cashel.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Yeah, just a question on the WUI and the wildfire threat, dealing strictly with public land. When I understand the Teck, for example, has considerable holdings of forested land that border public land. I'm just wondering why your survey only deals with public lands and not private lands.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pretty common comment, but or a limitation of these plans, but it is related to restrictions on funding, like coming from UBCM. So they specifically want to complete assessments of public land only. So private land is simply not a fundable activity within these plans.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In addition to that comment as well, one of the recommendations, and we actually asked to include the recommendation, was to collaborate or share information between Teck property and the partners surrounding, because that is an issue that we've had a little bit of challenges with. So we do engage with Teck Lands, and they have completed their own CWRPs for all of their private lands that they have owned. Just unfortunately, that document isn't public, and they won't share with the RDKB at this point as well. However, Tova is also contracted with VA Blackwell, and she does lead up the fuel mitigation works that has been recommended by Teck. And so when there is upcoming projects that already have been slated and a timeline has been attached, Tova has been really great at reaching out on behalf of tech to let us know of the planned fuel mitigation projects that are going to be occurring within the next, say, 6 months. Anything further from that, they have communicated that they aren't prepared to share that at this time, just because they don't want expectations of those projects to be completed by a certain period of time if they're not able to meet those objectives, whether it be through funding, staffing, timelines, things like that. So as far as projects that are occurring on Techland in the next few months, the only one that we have been notified of so far is the Warfield Water Treatment Plant. We're going to be doing some fuel mitigation work up in that area. But that's as much as we know. So we are constantly trying to reach out and collaborate to find out what's going to be planned, because as you know, yes, there is considerable amount of tech land specifically around trails. So we tried, but it's not getting information.
Councillor Benson.
Can you tell us more about the Community Fire Smart and Resiliency Committee?
For sure. I can speak to it a little bit, and then I don't know, Carlene, maybe you have some more up-to-date information. Yeah, just like very generally, it's like a recommendation from UBCM that it started as a recommendation as a way to increase communication that's happening between different parties, between local government, First Nations, private landholders within the eligible WUI area. They're noticing a real disconnect and kind of some redundancy in plans that were going on, some issues relating to not enough engagement with each other. So that kind of came out of those problems that were observed, and it is now a mandatory part of obtaining these grants is having an active committee that's working to communicate across these issues.
So further to that, is that so the RDKB has hosted 2 community wildfire resiliency meetings, community fire smart resiliency committee meetings. So basically what that is we're bringing key partners and stakeholders to the table. So ours currently right now is a regional committee, and basically includes a number of different representation from, we have a couple individuals that are representing the city of Trail. So Colin has been at one of those ones, I think, so far. We've also had Public Works involved as well, who was our key contact for emergency planning. And we also bring partners such as BC Wildfire, Indigenous partners, Ministry of Transportation, Fortis, basically anyone who has any, I guess, kind of stake in community wildfire resiliency planning. And so we do host 2 annually. We did start it in 2023 when it was still a recommendation. And we did host one previously this spring to introduce the draft plans for the community wildfire resiliency plans, so that the contributors to the plans were able to provide feedback, comments, questions, and concerns to the plans before it was finalized. The next one that we will be looking to host will be in the fall. And there is a possibility, as our Fire Smart program expands and as we start diving into key priorities and recommendations as per directed by each municipality, that we might break up some of these this committee into more of a sub-regional committee. We're just being super cognizant of the fact that a lot of the contributing or collaborating partners, such as BC Wildfire, Kootenay Boundary Regional Fire Rescue, and another of partner agencies, we just want to be cognizant of the fact of their time, because a lot of their jurisdiction overlaps multiple different municipalities. So in an area such as ours in the East End, where we're all very closely connected, it's difficult and challenging for them to be able to go to 6 different meetings type of thing. So sub-regionally, we may separate a little bit from the boundary and focus specifically on the East End, especially as Monica stated on the WUI map, how essentially Warfield Trail and Montrose are all one kind of continuous area. So we'll be looking to probably do that in 2025, once we start looking at potential for fuel mitigation activities as well as some further planning.
And then just one more question.
Sure.
Well, it's just a comment. I heard your interview on Daybreak on CBC, and I thought it's really important work that you're doing. So it was a really good interview. So I hope everything went well at the.
Pushed me way out of my comfort zone, but yeah, the team at CBC is really great at making me sound pretty good on radio. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, Councillor Hanson.
Thank you for the great report. I love the educational part and bringing it into the schools. I think training kids and getting them educated is like, a great first step. But I also was wondering, so it had been identified 2 areas in particular by the hospital there. So what would mitigation of that be, or what would that look like? Who would be responsible, and what would the steps forward for mitigating fire and fuel management in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So just first on your comment on education, the Fire Smart curriculum just came out in 2023, and so we are able to start delivering as per the BC curriculum in the schools. So I know that Webster Elementary has already started delivering it to the kids in grades 3, 4, and 5, which is excellent. And then we are slated to attend 3 summer camps this year as well to provide Fire Smart education to those kids from ages 6 to 12. So looking to further enhance that. And then as far as the fuel mitigation, so as Monica mentioned, the next step in that process would be the City of Trail to identify as that would be the priority that they want to start working on and start allocating some of their funding towards. If that is one of the recommendations that you would like for us to move forward on the Fire Smart program, then we would look at obtaining a prescription for those areas through a forestry consultant that would develop a prescription and basically recommend or identify ways that fuel mitigation will be taking place, whether it be through mechanical means, so heavy equipment removing fuel, either through burning, whatever, if that is feasible as well. And then working with the city in conjunction to try to obtain grant funding. We also have the ability to not only use UBCM funding, but CBT funding as well, potentially. And we'd be working with the municipality directly in order to be able to implement those the plans for fuel mitigation. So it would be over the course of probably the next couple of years. So beginning in 2025. So yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, just a quick comment. We actually had the Fire Smart program come to our home, and because of the trees and where we sit on the hill to the water tower bank, we thought it was important to have it looked at, and really appreciated the information that was shared. But we do have a lot of work ahead of us. Getting all those old trees, taken away, but I can totally see why it's so important to have this program, brought to your home so that you can understand exactly what to look for and how important the Fire Smart program is as well. So yeah, we really appreciated the information you shared. I just wanted you to know that. It was great.
Thank you. We really appreciate you contacting us and signing up for the assessment. I do think it's really important, and I highly encourage everyone here at the table to engage us for an assessment. It is free, and it is only personalized to you, so you are the only ones that do see those reports. But it does really kind of emphasize the importance of the Fire Smart assessments, as well as creating better resilience towards wildfires. But also, we are introducing a residential rebate program this summer as well. So I'm hoping to have that out in the next week or so. So everyone who's had assessments already are already eligible. So if you are looking to undergo some of those recommendations and you would like to have some assistance with some of the grant funding, then we do have residential rebates available for some of that work to be completed as well. So that'll help out for for all that work that needs to be done, for sure.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no other questions, well, thank you for coming this afternoon. Thank you, Monica.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Monica. And one more point is the 96-page report. The CWRP has been, I did send it to Sandy this morning so that she could save a copy here at the City of Charlton. Each of you can view that report in full as well, because Monica just did a very brief overview of it. So.
Oh, good.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much.
Have a good summer.
Thanks, you too. I'm sure I'll see most of you out and about.
Yeah.
Very busy summer, which is good so far, but.
Okay. On to item number 3, Parks and Recreation. And we have the recreation fee bylaw 2024-2025. And I'll hand that over to Mr. McClure.
Yes. Thanks, Mayor Jones. Council, just as far as how this has been our practice, I guess, is that we sort of, before we actually build the bylaw up, what to get sort of that direction from council as to what would the increases be. So this is sort of that first step, getting that permission as to where we sense that we need the kind of what rate of an increase that we're looking for. The bylaw itself has some work that needs to be done on it, some updating of the language and just some of the things that it points to in regards to TRP and whatnot that we're wanting to update, and that will come later here in the fall, not late, but I guess early fall, I guess, late summer, and that has to be in place so that we can allow for the activity book. So we kind of end up in this, get some direction on what the rates are, come and bring the rates into you for September, then they get into the book, and so you're just kind of going from again late September until the following year as where the rates are in place. So this has been kind of an ongoing practice. So certainly discussed with staff on the financial implications of what we're proposing, and I think that council is aware. I would believe that the community is aware. These services for recreation are heavily subsidized. So again, it's important on these rates that they are, comparable to other communities, which is some of the work that gets done by staff on looking at what is the charge for having pool pass, having a fitness pass, what the drop-in rates are, what's the hours going to be, what dollar amounts going to be for hockey, all of the different fees that we have. But just to be clear that that the fees themselves make up a small portion of what revenues we use to operate the multiple recreational facilities that we have. At this point in time, one of the things that we are seeing, the good news, I guess, is especially with the TRP with Roslyn being settled, is that we're really seeing an uptick in usage, which is great. I mean, I think that we heard from the ball, minor ball as well, what differences that's made. And so we're seeing the benefits of that. And I believe that there's, an additional revenue coming from the more usage, more individuals kind of coming in and using the facilities. So that's one of the factors that has come into looking at where we're at for a rate increase. We do note that we did have a significant QP increase, but our wages are a portion of the entire operations, and we are seeing sort of a inflationary, yes, but not the kind of jumps that we have been seeing earlier on whether it's chemicals or whatnot for operating facilities. And so that's where there's a sense here that although we've got some increases on wages and benefits, that we're also having some other really good revenue results and a smoothing or a lighter inflationary increase as far as what we're seeing on other costs. And that's where we've sort of landed on that 3% for 2024. And again, remembering that's kind of September 2024 until basically September of 2025. In 2023, we had a 4% increase. Again, wages at that time would have been 2%. So, but we were also feeling a lot more pressure on our other services and costs that we have for supplies and services on inflationary. And so again, one of the factors, and then we were at 3% in 2022. So 3 and a 4 and another 3. And really hoping, that when we go in for the next year, we're really going to get a better sense, because we really are returning now to sort of that full operations before we didn't have swimming lessons for a while. We didn't have enough lifeguards. So a lot of effort has been put in sort of in our different facilities. We now have the kids rink brand new, replaced. We have obviously big plans for the Kamiko Arena as well, other upgrades that are going on. So we see a lot of positives happening. I mean, we're also seeing the McIntyre room, the Victoria Street room. Those are all been invested on, and we're seeing some new revenues coming from rentals of those spaces as well. So as a whole, I think that we're getting back to numbers that are going to even be higher than where we were for pre-COVID. And so this is where we bring today. And obviously it's a GOC meeting here. We're just wanting to make sure we've got that direction. We don't want to show up in September with someone going, hey, by the way, can we change all the rates to something else? So we feel comfortable of what we're suggesting to council, and we're looking for, again, some feedback and hopefully hear a direction for us to move forward on the not only the rates, but I said there's a real refresh of the bylaw itself that needs to be done.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Any questions before we move the recommendation? Councillor Benson?
And you've probably explained this like many times, I'm sorry. Why do we do this now and not at like budget time?
Well, again, I guess because of the habit of where that it sort of sits, in that we do look at it in a sense on budget wise, kind of where our numbers are coming in, and they don't tend to be major drivers. So
Okay.
like if you were thinking about your overall revenue, it's not something that you're going like, hey, what if we had this increase, how much of that is going to have an effect? We are mostly looking at the trends
Okay.
of what's going to happen, like for swimming lessons and the different revenue sources that we have. It is part of it. We look at it. We look at where we were the year before, what we're seeing, and as far as practices going, because a lot of times, even when we're doing budget, I've already had a good chunk of hockey or other activities happening. So you're kind of seeing what's already coming in. So we are looking at that. And because you're always at the same time looking at last year's numbers for here, even if I was taking it into account, they wouldn't hit until 2025 anyway. For a chunk of them, if
Right.
that makes any sense. You're kind of got this
'cause it's
small window of
yeah.
3 months sort of thing by the time you're making that change.
Okay.
So again, past practice doesn't mean that we couldn't adjust it. I just know that it really seems to function well for getting out the activity books. That is a key component. Tend to have a quieter time at the pool. Obviously, with the rinks, yeah, you might get the odd camps, but you don't have minor hockey going on. Like I said, yes, you've got some swimming, but most people are either at the lake or going to go in at gyro and whatnot. And so there doesn't seem to be that sort of drive for, and then again, that goes back to where we have closure or maintenance time too here in the fall or the end of summer. So that's sort of been our practice. And I don't see it having too much of a drive, an effect on what our budget is.
And then one thing I learned from the Working Poverty Community Table is how important these facilities are for those because they're heavily subsidized. And I was wondering if there's a way if this goes through, if we could also do a bit of a promotional like blitz of the common access card for people,
Right.
let them know about it and so that they can apply, so that they can get discounts at the pool and at many other places throughout.
And again, too, and I think everyone's kind of aware of what Council Benz is talking about, right? It's sort of that one place where you get that common access, because it's not easy for those people that might have those types of challenges to come forward. But at least if they've got it in one spot, they do it sort of once, where you don't have to do it every location that might ask you for that. So yes, I think that's a great idea to promote that. And I think it's one of the reasons too that we looked at even where the increases in rates are. And I know that some might say, well, what's the difference between a 3, a 4, or 5 on, we're talking cents on say a day pass, but it does mean something on someone that has an annual pass. I mean, it does have an effect that way. So we try to be cognizant of the users, and that's one of the things that we took into consideration when we built the rates or expected increase for rates.
Councillor Hanson?
I actually was thinking kind of something along the same lines as Councillor Benson. Life has gotten expensive for a lot of families. Right, groceries have gone up. All of that cost of living has gone up. So is there a way that we can look at, if someone has multiple kids or something, giving them a bit of a discount on their kids' swimming lessons or something, like very minimal, but something to just help them out? Because I know, with dance, my daughter's in dance, if she's registered for more than one class, she gets a discount if she's on more than one class. Same with multiple kids of a family. It just helps, ease that financial burden a bit. Is that something, I know, I understand where the fee increase and revenues and labor wages makes sense, but is there a way that something like that we can offer through the activity guide for like a program for kids? Could we look at something like that potentially?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can, but we also want to be cognizant that, we talk about the common access card as one of these. Another one that's big in our community is also the kids sport. And I don't know if council is aware of that, but we do see and are very fortunate for the people that provide funding through that. And on a regular basis, I see families, individuals of being able to have that support come in for kids sport. Again, not that sometimes it's just the complications sometimes of how many kids and where you fit and that sometimes can be one of those challenges of trying to find a program that is successful but isn't too administratively cumbersome, sort of thing.
Challenging.
Yes.
I get it. Thanks.
Mr. McClure, we haven't seen any reports on the TRP program for a while.
We actually met last week. So some of the and so we were pulling some numbers, and we were not able to get it in time for this meeting. But all the partners are excited to kind of see what's going on, because we also made some changes just in how we're tracking to try to really emphasize who's coming. Be able to talk to our different partners, because some of those agreements we have, obviously the one currently with TRP with Roslyn for the year, and we know there's been good success there with that group, but we also know that we've got Beaver Valleys coming up in the near future, and it's still ways away, but it's amazing how the time rolls by. And then we'll have Warfield as well, and just really wanted to work with all of the groups on making sure that we've got accurate data, and that's it's taking some time, but we're confident, and I will be happy to share that. I will probably be coming then at this stage. I would say we'll be coming at the August meeting. I can share something like that.
Is there any other questions before we move to the recommendation? Okay, having seen no questions, the recommendation is that the committee endorse the fee increase of 3% as presented for services through the Parks and Recreation Department, and that staff be directed to bring forward an amendment to the trail recreation fee bylaw number 2782, 2014 at a future meeting. Councillor Cashel, is there a seconder, please? Councillor Hanson? Oh, Councillor Butler, sorry. All those in favor? Thank you. That was carried unanimously.
Thanks, Council.
Okay, item number 4, general government. 4.1 is the privacy policy, and I'll pass this on to Ms. Butler.
Thank you. So legislation requires that we do privacy impact assessments if we are going to make changes where we are collecting personal information. One of those is with ICBC when we do plate searches. So ICBC has said you better get privacy policy together, else you won't be allowed to do it. So we came up with this privacy policy, and we will be sending that out. But we will also be doing some stuff training on policy impact statements going forward. So this is one of those must things that we need to have in our policy booklet. That's it.
Okay. Any questions or comments before we move to the recommendation?
Search. What is a plate search? Oh, like a license plate search, so for parking tickets and
Gotcha.
towing
Of course.
yeah, license plates.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so not that we can
Not
do
like
anything on
dinner
that,
plate.
Well,
but
I figure with IC, but yeah.
yeah, but sometimes even if the public works crew's working in an area and a vehicle's there and they want to get the contact information before they kind of
Gotcha.
So there's just these benefits.
Especially on snow clearing.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this has been a key component, especially with privacy,
Yeah.
privacy breaches. You know, who our vendors are, who's holding what information, and how they flow through. A lot of municipalities, you know, have had this in place for quite a long time. So it's the trail's getting up to speed in particular, and getting best practices and making sure that we're compliant, so we can work with ICBC.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is before council, and that is that the committee recommend adoption of the City of Trails Privacy Policy Number GG 001-6 as presented. Councillor Benson, Councillor Hanson, all those in favor? Thank you. That was carried unanimously. And item 4.2 is Jubilee Place, request for parking. And that's Ms. Lucchini.
Yep. So the Groudage Avenue Esplanade Development Project is coming to completion, meaning that the new parking area there will become available to rent on a monthly basis. We have a request from the Trail Elderly Citizens Housing Society to allow 6 of their tenants to rent monthly parking there. They now have more tenants with cars than they can accommodate in their parking lot. And because the city has a waiting list for monthly parking, it's being brought before council just for approval to allow the first 6 spots to be rented by the Jubilee Place tenants. We find that a lot of the times when people's names come up on the waiting list, they think about where the lot is located, and if it's not convenient to where they work, they'll say, "Oh no, thank you. I'll wait for a spot in the Fortis lot when to become available." So we do think that this won't be as popular as some of our other lots, and it's probably the highest and best use for allowing seniors in our community to park there and not have to worry about their vehicles on the street and plugging in the daytime.
Any questions?
Is there any accessibility concerns from the parking lot to the building?
No, I don't believe so. It's actually quite convenient.
And Ms. Lucchini, did we gain any parking spaces with the new, upgrade down there?
We do. We have 25 spaces down there. So there will be parking available to people on the waiting list as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
And a number of them also are handicap marked. So
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no other questions. I'll put the recommendation forward. Okay. The recommendation is that council approve the designation of up to 6 parking spots in the Groudage parking lot as rental spaces for tenants of Jubilee Place at the cost noted in the fees and charges bylaw number 2313, 1995 for rental of service city-owned parking spaces. Councillor Benson, Councillor Cashel, those of you in favor? Thank you. That was carried unanimously. Okay, item number 5 is a resolution to adjourn the Governance and Operations Committee portion of the meeting and immediately resolve into in-camera meeting. And the recommendation is that pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter, the public will be excluded from the meeting as the subject matter being considered relates to the following: the Community Charter, Section 91E, the Community Charter, Section 91G, and the Community Charter, Section 91L. Someone make that motion, please. Councillor Hanson, Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried unanimously.